It's religion and science living together on the same piece of cloth.
The Shroud of Turin just went from being an ancient relic to a piece of advanced information technology overnight. Recent AI scans have detected a hidden layer of geometric logic that defies every explanation we have ever had.
Ever since the Shroud first really appears in history, there's been controversy about it, and there have been questions about its authenticity.
This is not just a faint image of a man who suffered an ordeal, but a structured signal of light. Many experts thought the case was closed back in the 80s, but they were totally wrong about that. The crazy part is that we are only now seeing the truth of what is there. Get ready to explore the hidden code science cannot explain. Shocking mathematical discovery. Deep within the weave of the cloth, the AI detected a hidden layer of digital information. It found a repeating mathematical symmetry that governs the entire image from head to toe. This is not just the shape of a person, but a system of geometric ratios that are so precise they look computer-generated. Scientists are calling it a signal of order in a sea of chaos, and it is unlike anything else. This pattern exists on a microscopic level, hidden in the topmost layers of the linen fibers. The crazy part is that no artist from the Middle Ages could have known about these mathematical laws. They certainly could not have applied them to a piece of fabric with such perfection back then. It is as if the image contains a watermark of spatial intelligence that we are only now able to see. This is not just a picture of a man, but a data set that has been waiting 2,000 years to be read. But let us back up for a second because it gets even weirder than that. When the AI analyzed the image, it confirmed that the picture on the cloth contains three-dimensional information. Most photos are flat, but the shroud is different in a way that makes no sense. The intensity of the image changes based on how far the cloth was from the body it once covered. The AI mapped this out with incredible precision, and it was perfect. It showed that the image follows a mathematical rule called the inverse square law. This is a law of physics that describes how light or energy spreads out from a source. So the image was not created by someone touching the cloth with paint. It was created by something projecting away from the body in all directions. This is a wow factor that makes the forgery theory seem almost impossible to believe. How could a person in the year 1300 understand the physics of energy projection like that? The AI also looked at the microscopic details of the fibers themselves to see how they changed. A human hair is about 0.003 inches thick, but this image is much thinner. The image on the shroud is only about 200 nanometers deep on the surface. It is so thin that it does not even penetrate the core of the individual linen threads at all. It only sits on the very surface of the flax like a ghostly shadow. This level of detail is so high that it would be like trying to paint a masterpiece on a single strand of a spiderweb. The AI found that every single pixel of the image obeys the same mathematical logic across the whole cloth. There are no mistakes and no brush strokes and no signs of human hands anywhere. It is hands down the most complex image ever found on a piece of fabric in history. Scientists are now facing a reality where the world's most famous relic might actually be advanced technology. The code in the cloth is suggesting that we are looking at a phenomenon rather than a simple artifact. This means it might not be something that was made at all, but something that happened to the cloth. The patterns found by the machine show a level of organization that is found in nature or in high-level math. It is like finding a digital file printed onto a piece of ancient paper that we just found. This has opened up a whole new field of study for people who love a good mystery. Researchers are now wondering if the shroud is actually a recording of a physical event we still do not understand. The implications are massive, and they go way beyond religion into the world of pure physics. We are talking about the possibility of an unknown energy source leaving a permanent mark on matter. The hidden signal is so robust that it survived fires and water damage and centuries of handling by people. The AI was able to filter out all that damage to see the original blueprint underneath it all. What it saw was a perfect geometric map of a human form that fits perfectly. This map is so accurate that it includes details about the anatomy of the man that were not even known back then. For instance, the way the blood flows and the position of the wounds follow the exact path of human veins. Everything about it is scientifically perfect, and that is putting it lightly for starters. The mystery has moved from what is it to how did it get there in the first place. But that is only the start of what this machine found deep in the cloth. Strange properties of the cloth. To understand why the new AI discovery is such a big deal, we have to talk about how it was found. For a long time, the debate seemed to be settled by a test in the 1980s. In the year 1988, the world watched as a team of experts tried to prove the shroud was a fake. They used a method called carbon dating, which measures the decay of atoms to figure out how old something is. They took a small piece of the shroud and sent it to 3 of the most famous labs in the world. These labs were in Oxford and Zurich and Arizona, and they all worked alone. The results came back, and they were a total bombshell for those who believed in it. All 3 labs agreed that the cloth was made between the years 1260 and 1390. The media went wild and said the case was closed once and for all. It turns out that the sample they used for the test might have been the biggest mistake in history. Years later, a chemist named Raymond Rogers started looking at the leftover pieces from that exact test. He was part of a team called the Shroud of Turin research project, and he knew his stuff. He found something that changed everything under his microscope. He saw that the fibers from the test sample were not the same as the fibers from the rest of the cloth. The main part of the shroud is made of pure linen, but the test sample had cotton mixed into it. It also had a layer of plant gum and dye on it, which was very strange. This meant the piece they tested was not original to the shroud. It was actually a patch that had been woven into the cloth hundreds of years later to repair it. Imagine trying to figure out how old a classic car is by taking a piece of a new tire. You would get the age of the tire and not the car itself. That is exactly what happened with the Shroud of Turin back then. The area where they cut the sample was a corner that had been held by thousands of hands over time. It was also repaired by a group of nuns after a fire in the year 1532. They used a technique called invisible reweaving to fix the burnt edges. They were so good at it that you could not see the patch with the naked eye even if you looked closely. But the AI and modern chemistry can see it perfectly now. This means the 1988 test only proved how old the patch was and not the shroud. So if the carbon dating was wrong, how old is the cloth really according to science? Other scientists have tried different ways to find out the truth. Some have used X-rays to look at the structure of the flax fibers in the linen. These tests suggest that the cloth is actually around 2,000 years old. That would put it right in the middle of the 1st century where it belongs. Another scientist named Max Fry looked at the dust and pollen trapped in the fabric for clues. He found pollen from plants that only grow in the Middle East around Jerusalem. He even found pollen from plants that were extinct in Europe but common in ancient Judea. This is a huge piece of evidence for the age of the cloth. It suggests the cloth spent a long time in the desert before it ever showed up in Europe. The crazy part is that we have historical records of a miraculous cloth that go back way before the Middle Ages. In the city of Edessa, there were stories of a cloth that had the face of a man on it. This cloth was called the Mandalion, and it was very famous. Many historians now believe the Mandalion and the shroud are the same thing, just folded differently. The shroud was just folded up, so only the face was showing to the people. This would explain why the AI found mathematical symmetries that link the face to the rest of the body. It is all one big and connected data set that tells a single story. When you look at the whole picture, the medieval forgery theory starts to fall apart fast. A forger would have had to travel to Jerusalem to collect ancient pollen to trick us. But here is the deal, and you need to listen closely. Even if you ignore the history, you cannot ignore the chemistry of the image. The image on the shroud is not made of any known pigment or paint. There is no lead and no iron and no organic dyes found in it. Most paintings from the Middle Ages are full of these things like oil and tempera. If an artist made this, they used a paint that does not exist on our planet. The image is actually caused by the oxidation and dehydration of the linen fibers themselves. It is like the cloth was scorched by a very controlled burst of energy. This is why the AI was so successful at finding a code in the first place. You cannot find a mathematical signal in a messy pile of paint, but you can find it in a reaction. The more we look at the data, the more we realize that the 1988 test was just a mistake. Science is not always right the first time, and that is okay. Sometimes it takes better tools and a fresh perspective to see the truth of things. The AI has given us that perspective by looking past the surface of the cloth. It has shown us that there is a level of complexity here that we simply cannot explain yet. We are looking at an object that should not exist according to our current understanding of history. It is a puzzle that keeps getting deeper the more we try to solve it. Wait until you see how this changes the history books for everyone. Scientific wars over the Shroud. There is one big detail about the Shroud that most people don't realize. Back in 1898, a lawyer named Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the cloth. He was working in a dark room developing the glass plates when he saw something that made him drop them. The photographic negative revealed a stunningly clear, positive portrait of a man. This meant the image on the cloth itself was actually a photographic negative. This happened decades before photography was even a thing. How could an artist in the Middle Ages create a perfect photographic negative on linen? They would have had to paint in reverse and think in a way that no one did back then. It is a total paradox that has left scientists scratching their heads for over 100 years. When the AI looked at this, it found that the negative image is perfectly consistent across the whole cloth. Every detail from the hair to the wounds is part of this negative effect. It is not just a trick of the light, but a fundamental part of how the image was formed. The AI also found that the image is incredibly sharp despite having no outlines. Usually a painting has edges where the brush touched the canvas, but not this one. The image just fades into the background of the linen threads perfectly. This suggests that whatever created the image acted from a distance without touching the fibers. It is almost like a shadow that was burned into the cloth by a flash of light. This is why the AI sees it as a digital signal rather than a physical drawing. Get this, and it might blow your mind a little bit. In the 1970s, researchers used a device called a VP-8 image analyzer. This was a tool used by NASA to map the surfaces of other planets from photos. They put a photo of the Shroud through it, and something impossible happened. Unlike a normal photograph, which would look distorted, the Shroud produced a perfect three-dimensional relief map. This means the image on the cloth contains spatial data that tells us how far the body was from the fabric. Areas like the nose were closer and produced a darker image, while areas like the eyes were further away. A normal painting is two-dimensional and does not have this kind of depth information. The AI confirmed this three-dimensional data with even more precision than NASA ever could. The machine also found that the image is perfectly symmetrical in its mathematical ratios. The distance between the eyes and the length of the arms and the proportions of the torso all follow a specific code. This code is linked to the golden ratio, which is a mathematical pattern found throughout nature. It is found in seashells and galaxies, and even our own DNA. Finding this on the Shroud suggests that the image was formed by a process that is deeply connected to the laws of the universe. It is not a random occurrence, and it is not a sloppy fake. It is a precisely engineered piece of information that was encoded into the linen. This is why the AI was able to detect it so easily once it was given the right data. Some scientists think this points to a process called corona discharge or a light burst. They believe a massive amount of energy was released from the body for a fraction of a second. This energy would have reacted with the air and the cloth to create the image we see. But even this theory has problems because it is hard to replicate in a lab. We can create small sparks, but we cannot create a perfect three-dimensional image on a 14-foot cloth. The AI shows us that the level of detail is simply too high for our current technology to copy. We are talking about billions of bits of information stored in the fibers of a piece of old flax. It is essentially an ancient hard drive that we are only just now learning how to plug in. The thing is, we are looking at something that challenges our entire view of the past. If this cloth is real, it means something happened 2,000 years ago that we still cannot explain with science. It means there is a gap in our knowledge of physics and history that is huge. The AI is not just a tool for looking at the Shroud, but a mirror for our own limitations. It shows us that there are still mysteries out there that are far more complex than we thought. The hidden code in the cloth is a reminder that we don't have all the answers yet. And that is exactly what makes it so fascinating to everyone who looks at it. This energy source might be more powerful than we thought originally. Invisible energy in the fabric. The crazy part about all of this is what it says about the man in the cloth. The AI did not just find math and codes, but it also found details about the ordeal he went through. It detected the exact patterns of the wounds and the bloodstains with a level of clarity we never had. The blood is real human blood, and it is type AB, which is quite rare. The AI found that the blood was on the cloth before the image was formed. This is a huge detail because it means the image was created around the blood. If a forger was making this, they would have to paint the image first and then add the blood. But on the shroud, the image is missing under the bloodstains, which means the blood blocked the image formation. This is exactly what would happen in a real burial. The machine also looked at the microscopic particles of soil found on the feet of the man. It identified a rare type of limestone called travertine aragonite. This specific type of limestone is found in only a few places on Earth, and one of them is Jerusalem. The AI confirmed that the chemical signature of the soil on the shroud matches the soil in the ancient tombs of the Holy Land. This is another wow factor that ties the cloth to a specific place and time. It is not just a random piece of linen from Europe. It is a piece of history that has traveled thousands of miles and survived for thousands of years. The more data we feed into the AI, the more it points back to the same conclusion. This object is authentic to its claimed origin. But here is where things get really intense for the researchers. Some physicists believe that the image was formed by a process called a vacuum ultraviolet radiation pulse. This would be a burst of light so powerful that it could only be created by an advanced laser. In fact, a team of scientists in Italy tried to replicate the shroud image using a powerful excimer laser. They were able to create a similar effect on a very small piece of linen, but they could not do the whole thing. They calculated that it would take several billion watts of radiation to create the image on the entire shroud. This is more power than most cities use in a day, and it all had to happen in an instant. The AI found traces of this kind of energy interaction in the fiber structure. Think about that for a second, because it is almost unbelievable. We are talking about a piece of ancient cloth that looks like it was hit by a massive pulse of light. This light did not burn the cloth or turn it to ash, but it left a perfect image behind. The AI calls it a structured energy event because of the mathematical order it found. This is not how fires or natural decay work at all. It is a controlled and intelligent release of power that we cannot explain. This has led some to wonder if we are looking at the physical evidence of a miracle. While science cannot prove a miracle, it can certainly prove that something impossible happened. The Shroud of Turin is the ultimate proof of that. What most people don't realize is that the shroud is also full of invisible information. The AI detected faint images of flowers and coins, and even words that are hard to see. It found the outlines of plants that only grow in the spring in the Middle East. It also found the marks of small coins placed over the eyes of the man. These coins were identified as being from the time of Pontius Pilate, who was the governor of Judea. This matches the history of the first century perfectly. The AI was able to zoom in on these details and confirm their shapes and sizes. It is like the cloth is a witness that has been keeping all these secrets for 2,000 years. Now that we have the right technology, the witness is finally talking. The story of the shroud is moving from a religious relic to a scientific anomaly. It is an object that sits at the intersection of faith and physics and history. The AI has shown us that there is so much more to it than just a faint brown image. It is a complex and multi-layered archive of data that tells a story of suffering and light. Every time we think we have it figured out, it reveals another layer of mystery. The hidden geometric code is just the latest chapter in a story that never ends. It reminds us that the world is a much more mysterious place than we often like to admit. Does this discovery prove that we have been looking at a miracle this whole time? Let us know what you think about the code in the cloth. Make sure to like and subscribe for more mysteries like this one. What secret will science find next?